Why don't you come join me? It's tea time. You'll be hearing a story, so I hope you would make some time for me today. Try not to lose your mind as I tell you this tale because today we'll be exploring the Mr. Samuel's Teatime Stories found on the channel Yara Asmar. Links are always in the description if you want to check it out first. And as always, my name is Estrella, and if you're interested, sit back, relax, and let's begin. Mr. Samuel's Teatime Stories, Part 1. Home. The video opens with text telling the audience this show is intended for good kids and confused adults. Additionally, a white-haired gentleman and a lady with a clock for a face is sitting in the center of a multicolored room with a hand puppet in between them. The two welcome the viewer while also commenting that they expected that we would have forgotten about them, but the gentleman said you would always remember and welcome home. And there's an emphasis on home as you could see on the board. The clock person's name is Mrs. Madeline, and she talks to the hand puppet, not wanting them to leave because she built her home within their bones, and without them, where would she live? The puppet responded by saying that she can't just build her home in people's bones, and that they need their bones. Mrs. Madeline accepted this, and a letter carried by a snail arrived. Mr. Samuel, the white-haired gentleman, read the letter. It's a letter centering around someone's fears and concerns, specifically with time. So Mr. Samuels will give the audience a few tips. The tips are to make your bed every day because it's important, and to shout at the clock because sometimes they can get silly. After this, they soon had a discussion with the snail and realized that the snail always carries their home. It's their shell. But this doesn't count according to Miss Madeline. Madeline started to whisper and sing, saying home is nowhere because everywhere is hell, and that home is not even in your mother's bed or inside your own head. The hand puppet and snail soon slowly backed away, and Mr. Samuels decided to move on to the bedtime segment of this video. But that's when we cut to static for a few seconds before returning to the multicolored room. I'm assuming we missed the bedtime story during that cut. Regardless, the two thanked someone by the name Mr. Bedtime Stories, and they said their goodbyes. Everything then turned to black and white, and now we hear a voice in reverse and text saying if you want to hear a joke. Credits also rolled, and the text continued by saying technically it's not a joke, and more of a riddle. What is the difference between a house and a prison? Sadly, the punchline was forgotten, but they knew it involved something with a window. And this is the end of the video. Some will say this is unsettling, creepy, or strange. However, I and a few others agreed that there's more than just that. There's a deeper meaning. For example, let's circle back to the letter about someone in distress and Mr. Samuel's advice about making your bed every day. The reason why most people give this advice is because doing minimal tasks like making your bed every day can help occupy someone's mind and to get them into a routine and to promote healthier habits. It can also give people a distraction from what? Whatever is troubling them in life. If they keep their environment neat and feel like they're accomplishing something, it helps ease many people's nerves and feel more in control with their lives. It doesn't work for everyone, and sometimes doing the same thing repeatedly might end with you forgetting why you're doing it in the first place, but in times of dread, these basic tasks are all it takes to keep your mind off of more bigger issues in life besides a messy bed. And quickly stepping away from that, the topic of home. What's a home to you? A safe space? Comfortable? What you always come back to after a tough day? Well, to me, home isn't just a few walls and a roof over my head. It's memories, family, and even special items. Without these things, a home is just a building with no feeling, plain and not even welcoming. Also, just like me, many people don't even consider their home to be a specific location. For me specifically, I think my home is my family, not a building. If I didn't have them, I would say my home is nowhere. Without them, it would feel like hell, and eventually I'll slowly start to feel like I'm trapped in my own mind, constantly thinking of dark and depressing thoughts, and even if I'm physically in my home, the memories that once were happy will start to warp, and my physical home will feel like a prison that's turning more corrupt with each dark thought. Grief sucks, obviously. With grief, all your happy memories with someone will suddenly be clouded because they're gone. How can you smile knowing you can't make any more memories with them? So when you get told to make your bed every day, it's in hopes to distract you and hopefully help you feel more in control with something in your life. There's good intentions behind that tip, but the reason for needing it is rough. However, speaking of memories, losing them can be just as bad as feeling sad from them. If you lose the memories of all the good times, you'll feel more like an empty shell, like a home with no furniture. You would feel empty, lost. And that's another prison on its own. With that being said, let's now continue to the next video. Mr. Samuel's Teatime Stories, Part 2. It's today again. It opens with the surroundings being noticeably black and white, there's a reverted voice in the background, and text in the bottom which reads, "Something's changed here, unless there's always been a hole in the middle of our living room." The colors then return to the room and Mr. Samuels welcomes the viewer, but also was surprised that they're here at this hour. Gloomy Madeline said it was apparently a bad time, but Mr. Samuels didn't mind the visit. The kettle soon went off, alerting that the tea was ready, but Madeline didn't want any tea anymore. Mr. Samuels ignored that comment and continued to welcome the viewer. "It's today again" was spelled on the board, and Mr. Samuels goes on to say that there's sometimes good times and bad times. Good times are on the right side of the clock's face, while bad times are when the sun goes to sleep on the left side of the clock. The reason for this is because bad times happen at that hour. The hand puppet soon popped up, and both the puppet and the clock said that it was a bad time right now, while Mr. Samuels said it was story time. Speaking of which, we hear a story about a peculiar man, and being alone was a good way to live for them. Every day was a good day to live, and later we see another puppet who talks in reverse. This puppet has text appearing on the screen which says we shouldn't be here because they're having tea. However, they accepted the company only if we would join. They also asked if we remembered what we were doing before. Before what? They don't remember. Maybe before tea time? They also said it couldn't have always been this time. They're sick of tea, but they have to make it for tea time. It's tea time all the time, but at least they won't have tea alone. Sadly, we were then forced away from that puppet and returned to the others. It's now bedtime. Wait a minute. A letter appeared. Mr. Samuel reads the letter out loud, which talks about the moon getting closer and hoping that all the doors are locked. There's also something hiding under the blankets. This reading was then interrupted by the others who had a brief argument about time either being straight or jumbled and how it smells. Many people see time differently, and Madeline goes on to sing that there is no future or past, and only now. She also says that time has many shapes: a donut, a prison, a labyrinth, etc. You can try not to acknowledge it, but it's always there. Time. After this song break, Madeline said enough time was wasted and it's time for bed, and the bedtime story will be told as one that happened not too long ago. Sadly, Mr. Samuels interrupted and thanked the viewer for coming, and in the end, the surroundings turned black and white, and we hear a reverted voice along with seeing text, just like before. It sounded like a conversation. It goes as so: "You're not really good at being a clock." "I'm a perfectly okay clock." "Clocks mustn't talk. Besides, now that I think about it, time has been quite still since you've entered this place." "My job is to keep it still." "No, it isn't. And now we're in a bit of a pickle." After this, the video ends with the credits. Now, the obvious takeaway from this video is time. Time sucks, to be blunt. Sometimes it feels like we don't have enough time when we really need it the most. And sometimes time can be scary because you don't know what to expect to happen a few seconds from now to even a year. Time is such a powerful thing, and we just have to reluctantly follow along. But here's the thing, some people can get lost within it. Whenever you look at Mr. Samuel throughout the video, he always seems lost and confused. He listens intently, but he has this blank stare to him that sometimes gets interrupted when he jumps a little, as if he's realizing something or is finally focusing his attention. Many people suspect that Mr. Samuels has dementia, which could explain a lot with the confusion that comes with time. When you're constantly losing yourself, keeping track of time can be difficult. Forgetting about the most important moments of your life, forgetting what made you you, or just forgetting what happened a few seconds ago, it can be exhausting and feel like a prison. And another addition to time and feeling trapped within it, let's circle back to the whole routine discussion. If you're the type of person who has a routine, whenever you do one misstep, regardless of how minimal the task is, it can sometimes derail the rest of your routine, and this can cause anyone great stress. So to not feel stressed, you constantly have to try to avoid these missteps. Sadly, many people find themselves trapped in a cycle of a routine of their own making, and one that they're scared to break because it's comfortable. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I believe these videos connect to a mental state. They can relate it to stress, bad habits, etc. The obvious one is about Mr. Samuels and his potential dementia. However, the good thing about art is that it makes the viewers also see things through their own perspective. These videos made me think a lot about my own state of mind, and when you look at the comment section, sure, there are a few people who seem confused, but a lot of others who feel like they're being understood. So as we watch these videos about a man slowly losing himself, we're also discovering something about ourselves. Interesting, isn't it? Or maybe I'm looking way too into this, who knows, there is an intended message within this story, so let's continue. Mr. Samuel's Bedtime Stories, Part 3, A Funeral is a Party. The video opens with Madeline, and she goes on to explain that she never expected us to come back, but we always do and never leave. We then cut to Mr. Samuel, who welcomes us home and is happy to see us. Afterwards, we see the board with the title of the video, A Funeral is a Party. Back to Madeline, she has a discussion with Mr. Snailmail. At first, they had a discussion whether the plants were being watered or not, and Madeline promises that she's been watering them every day, but as the screen backs away, we notice Mr. Samuel pressed against two walls. Not only that, but there's colorful playmats with numbers spiraling around the darkness. The black hole is still noticeable as well. We then see Mr. Samuels through the window of the wall, and Madeline points out that something is wrong, but Mr. Snail argues that this is their home. Madeline responds by saying that the thing about home, you can leave anytime you want, but this place that they're in, how can they possibly leave? There's not exactly a noticeable exit, and they never exactly left before. Madeline continues to comment that something is wrong before proceeding to sing. She sings about how the sunlight is different there, and Mr. Samuels seems to listen in delight and swaying side to side before eventually the song ends and a letter appears for him to read. It's a funeral announcement about someone with the name Mr. Delight. The thought of death seems to scare Madeline, and she doesn't like the fact that it was a friend who died, but Mr. Samuels said it was a part of life. The hand puppet then appeared, which surprised the others, and Madeline questions them about where they've been and added that her plant is dying. Mr. Samuels soon interrupted them to remind them that they need to celebrate the life of Mr. Delight. This reminded Madeline about the time Mr. Delight first moved into their new home and that they made a welcoming party for them. With this connection, they all agreed that a funeral is like a party, just devoid of joy and full of tears. And surprisingly, instead of Madeline singing the next song, it was the hand puppet. In the song, they sang about missing the person and wishing that they could have stayed long, but still thanking them for coming. Everyone was swaying, and they took a moment of silence towards the end of the song, I'm assuming to pay the respects for the dead. Afterwards, each of them gave kind words to Mr. Delight and thanked them. And in the end of the video, we see the credits and captions paired with a reversed voice, just like the previous videos. It reads as so: your job was to keep time. You have asked me to keep time, time after time, but you see, time cannot be kept, and a clock is not a prison. Unexpectedly, we soon saw static after this and stayed there until the video ends. Now, circling back to the discussion about grief, in this video, it tries to shine a brighter light on the idea of death. Funerals are meant to honor and celebrate the person who died and to appreciate them for being in our lives in the first place, thanking them for stopping by. We can be sad that they're gone, but like Mr. Samuels acknowledges, death is just an expectation in life. However, I also want to make a brief comment on how Madeline acknowledges that they can't seem to leave their home. Now, it might just be me assuming things, but maybe home is supposed to represent the mind. Unlike an actual building, we can't leave our own minds. And when dealing with grief and hardship, it only makes that space more insufferable. So the mind can be considered a prison for most. Speaking of prisons, the comment about time not being one is also interesting. Technically speaking, time is inevitable, and the only reason why we feel trapped in it is because of our own doing. We force ourselves into routine, and if we constantly think of our own lifespans, we're making ourselves feel like we lack control. We still have to obey time, but time isn't threatening us by fast-forwarding or rewinding. It's powerful, but we decide what we do with it. However, the depths of our own mind is challenging. Everything takes time. Getting over grief, having patience, learning skills, etc. Things take time. We can lose track of it or forget about it, but we won't change that time will always be there. We're just not sure when it will come for us. With that little tangent out of the way, let's now continue to the last video. Mr. Samuels' Tea Time, Part 4, ? We see Mr. Samuels, who commented that after all this time, it's still us. Mr. Samuels then continues by saying that he can always count on us to come back, even if we forget, and only remember when we come back. He also states that we never really leave this place, or that we never really could. Regardless, we're welcomed. However, Mr. Samuels wishes he could go. The sun hen puppet soon arrived and asked Mr. Samuels who he talks to when the others aren't around, and Mr. Samuels questions where they go when they're not there. The answer is outside, which Mr. Samuels says there isn't an outside. He checked, but he doesn't know where it is. As they continue to talk, it's clear that Mr. Samuels wants to go. He wishes to go. The sun hen puppet questions him for this, saying that this is their home and wondering why Mr. Samuels wants to leave so badly. After all, Mr. Samuels doesn't know anything else. The puppet doesn't even know if there's anything else. This place might not be much, but it's still their home. The sun puppet then proceeded to sing about daydreams and the idea of wanting to leave, but this is their home, as they keep mentioning, and it's one that they made. Also, I may be wrong, but in the background we can almost hear Madeline's voice. Anyways, Mr. Samuels listens intently while swaying side to side in his seat. The puppet also comments that Mr. Samuels is forgetful, and there's nothing out there. Where would he even want to go? And at the end of the song, the puppet is gone, and we zoom in on Mr. Samuels, who closes his eyes and static takes over the screen. And in the background, we hear the same song from the previous video about funerals, thanking you for stopping by and saying goodbye. This is the final video, meaning it's time for my final thoughts. And expectedly, I want to return to the topic of dementia, specifically the theory that Mr. Samuels has it. This video makes it more apparent that it's true. He's feeling lost and losing his memories and slowly himself. In the previous videos, the surroundings were full, but in the final moments, it was dark and empty, and the dark hole that appeared earlier only fills the situation with more suspicion. Additionally, when he closed his eyes, the surroundings turned static. This likely signified his death, or completely losing his mind. He's an old man. It's not surprising to imagine that he would have dementia and that his time was coming to an end. And in the end of the series, it may be a story technically about dementia, however, the viewers can connect to these videos in their own ways with their own perspectives. As I mentioned before, that's the amazing thing about art. It's a very short series, but very impactful. If you haven't watched it, then you really should. It provokes a whole different feeling than just having someone explain to you their own thoughts. Anyways, the links are in the description if you're interested. And as always, my name is Ripistrella. Don't forget to like, subscribe, maybe follow my Twitter, leave a comment, and I better not catch you dying on me. Goodbye.